Chapter 13. The office of the Special Affairs Department was completely silent. That's it. AI Ching looked at the sweating man behind the desk. Two perfectly fine people. And you're telling me that they're gone? There's nothing we can do about it. We only managed to get a few side views from the surveillance cameras. They were both wearing masks, so we couldn't tell where they came from. As for this picture, the man looked at the picture of the prisoner tied to the chair on the desk, and his headache worsened. He pointed at the bridge of his nose and cheekbones and said, "There are obvious signs of plastic surgery here, and it hasn't been that long. It won't be easy to find them. If there were so many easy things in the world, there would be peace a long time ago." AI Ching wasn't interested in this sort of brainless excuse. She pointed at the white powder in the plastic bag on the desk. "What about this thing? Are there any new clues?" The man looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. "Is that so?" AI Ching seemed disappointed. "If Xinhai's ability is not enough, then I can only report it to the Astronomy Society. However, if the lid was lifted and something bad happened, then it really wouldn't be good." Cough, cough, cough. "No, that's not what I meant." The unlucky man who had obviously been pushed out to take the blame hurriedly waved his hands. He didn't dare wait for the right price. "It's not that we don't want to cooperate, but this kind of unconventional, hallucinogenic drug mixed with origin substances is too common. We can't find out where it came from." AI Ching frowned. "The part of it that affects people mainly comes from the origin substances, but there are too many relics from the borderlands that can create this kind of thing, and it's too easy to change the composition. Just based on the records alone, there are dozens of them that have been circulating on the market. If we can check the Astronomy Society's database of banned drugs, there might be tens of thousands of them. At the end of the day, the abilities of the Ascended and the products of hell are too illogical. We really can't do anything about it." The man who was wiping his sweat had already admitted defeat. "Since you don't have the ability, why do you have to be such a burden?" AI Ching looked away in disappointment and prepared to leave. The man heaved a sigh of relief, but after pushing open the door, AI Ching turned her head and suddenly asked, "Since there are so many things you can't do, you won't refuse when I need your help, right?" "Right, that's right." The man behind the table was stunned for a long time, and he couldn't help but curse those good-for-nothings in his heart. After secretly recording a big score, he reluctantly squeezed out a smile and said, "We will definitely do our best to cooperate." "That's great." The door closed. Music! In the dimly lit private room, two figures were snuggling on the sofa, whispering sweet nothings to each other. One of them raised his hand and snapped his fingers. So, in the corner, the expressionless Huai numbly played the violin. In his backpack, he emotionlessly wrote a record in the Book of Destiny. "On the first day I worked with Yu Dongri, he made me play the violin for him. I'll remember this grudge." That's right. This was Huai Shi's first day as a part-time gigolo. In order to survive, he degenerated from an elegant cello player to Yu Dongri's dedicated BGM player. The duo debuted together. One sold his body, the other sold his art. With 3 curls and a V-neck jacket, it was only a matter of time before he became a gigolo superstar. No way. Everyone else was a personal bodyguard. Why was it that, when it came to him, it became his personal bodyguard? Sleeping in the same room was fine, but even going to work together, was this necessary? If it wasn't for the danger to his life and AI Ching's 800 yuan per day employment fee, he would have already quit. Now, before this matter was resolved, he was probably tied to this gigolo. Huai Shi's requirements weren't high. "I'll take the blame. You go die." When this matter was resolved, everyone would go their separate ways. They would tacitly act as if nothing had happened and not be involved in anything for the rest of their lives. This was the best. After he sent that stupid crow away, He would be able to start his life anew. He would rely on his newly activated golden finger to reach the pinnacle of his life, marry a rich and beautiful woman, and fulfill his wish of counting money until he broke dozens of money printing machines. He would be so famous that he would be able to enter the card pool as a beautiful girl after he died. Just as he was fantasizing, his sensitive hearing suddenly heard a suppressed cry from the sofa. Amidst the alcohol and the sorrowful cello sound, the woman in Yu Dongri's arms couldn't hold back the sadness in her heart. She choked out and held Yu Dongri's hand. "In my heart, I've always treated you as my son. I'm sorry. I've always hidden it from you. If my son was still alive, he would definitely be as old as you." In Huaishi's faint snort, Yu Dongri's businesslike smile also became stiff. Finally, after he sent the client away, he came back to see Huaishi's mocking expression. Huaishi looked at him and sighed from the bottom of his heart. "Is this the legendary, enlightening smell of a gigolo?" "Enlightening my ass." Yu Dongri rolled his eyes. "The smell of heather flowers is more like it. I've slept with her so many times, and I've become a son." TSK. Shouldn't you express your opinion that you're just comforting lonely women and bringing
Yu
them warmth
Dongri
or
squinted
something?
at him and
Then
pointed
I
to
can
his
also
head.
change
No
my
matter how
view
well you
of the
say it,
gigolo profession.
gigolos are only
I
responsible for
suspect you have a
selling
problem
smiles
here.
and bodies.
How can there be so many high-end things? But I see that you're making him very happy. Huaishi was stunned for a moment and looked at him with pity again. "Don't tell me you like old aunties." "Nonsense." Yu Dongri looked at him contemptuously. "Do you think everyone is as poor as you are? Back then, with this face of mine, I could make as much money as I wanted. In a few days, I made 40 million. Huaishi was still calm. "Oh, and then I was caught." Yu Dongri said dryly, "I was caught by that woman herself. Later, she said that if you like to use your face to cheat money from women, you might as well be a gigolo. When you pay off the money I cheated, you'll be free." Huaishi was stunned. "Then you really have to be a gigolo. What else? Be sent to the border? My ability doesn't work on things other than humans. If I go there, I'll die." Yu Dongri smoked gloomily. "The gun is already in your mouth. Why don't you try shaking your head? You're about to pee your pants." Hearing this, Huaishi was very curious. He leaned forward and whispered, "Didn't you use your ability at that time?" Yu Dongri's expression became more and more dispirited. After a long time, he squeezed out a few words from his mouth. "I used it, it didn't work." "Then did you use it or not?" "I used it, but it didn't work at all." Yu Dongri shook his head in frustration. "Later, I kept thinking my ability worked. I even used 10 times the amount in order to escape. When I used my ability, she should have fallen madly in love with me. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Her name is AI Ching, but in the end, love is worthless to her." Huaishi compared it to the woman he met a few days ago and was shocked. "Are you really describing a human and not Iron Godzilla?" Finally, Yu Dongri looked at him like he was looking at an idiot. "You're kidding, right? She's the head of the astronomy club in Xian High, an inspector who has the power to make all the ascendants work for her. How can Godzilla compare to her? If you offend Godzilla, you'll just die a horrible death. But if you offend her, you'll suffer a fate worse than death." Just as the two were talking, they had already left the club's back door and were walking down the street, looking for a place to eat dinner. Yu Dongri was treating. He couldn't stand Huaishi's noodles anymore. "If I don't eat some meat, my abs will digest by themselves." Yu Dongri patted his stomach. "How about a hot pot?" Huaishi glanced at him and said darkly, "I heard that eating too much hot pot makes your butt hurt." Yu Dongri was stunned, then realized that this little B*****'*'''''''*s words had a hidden meaning. He couldn't help but raise his leg and give this B**** a good kick. In the end, he couldn't stand it anymore and went home after eating a bowl of noodles. Yu Dongri was still tired from walking and said that he would drive the car over tomorrow. I say, it's already midnight. Huaisher walked on the road and couldn't help but yawn. Can't you get off work earlier? Brother, I'm 17 this year. I'm still growing. Is that so? I think you're almost there. Where else do you plan to grow? Yu Dongri snorted. Plus, what kind of male prostitute works during the day? Because of you, I missed work for the rest of the night. As he said that, he rubbed his fingers and asked Huaisher to think about how much he could earn at night. Huaisher's expression suddenly became strange. He looked back at him for a long time and suddenly asked, "Does this count as me advising you to turn over a new leaf?" Get lost. Just as he was farting on the road, Huaisher heard the sound of a bird flapping its wings. A black crow landed on a tree in front of him and looked back at him. For some reason, Huaisher suddenly felt a chill. Under the crow's hint, he suddenly turned his head and looked behind him. At the end of the quiet street in the suburbs, under the dim light of the street lamps, there was a stooped shadow silently crouching on top of a fire hydrant. The slightly comical mask of the ape slowly raised its head. It stared at them with indifferent eyes. Finally, it's here. Almost in an instant, Yu Dongri reacted. His left hand blocked Huaisher behind him and stuffed his handbag into his arms. His right hand reached into his arms and grasped the weapon in the holster. He quickly retreated. At the same time, the sharp sound of metal rubbing against each other burst out from the feet of the fierce ape. Under the pair of slowly accumulating sharp claws, the fire hydrant was torn apart like a thin piece of paper. As the shadow suddenly jumped up and pounced on them, a violent water column gushed out from the broken fire hydrant. Huaisher staggered back, looking around in panic. He couldn't help but rejoice in his fear. Fortunately, the guy chose to attack here. If they walked a bit further, there would be no street lamps. In the darkness, Yu Dongri's ability would not have any room to play. Without waiting for him to react, the fierce ape's roar broke through the air, and in a flash, it was already 10 steps away. Yu Dongri was already standing directly under the street lamp. He raised his hand, combed the hair in front of his forehead, and grinned at the fierce ape. In a flash, some power that Huaisher didn't understand was activated. With Yu Dongri's face as a medium, it was reflected in the fierce ape's eyes. In a flash, its movements were stiff, and it fell from the air. It couldn't move. It was even difficult to breathe. Yu Dongri didn't dare to be careless. He raised the gun in his hand, aimed at the ape, and pulled the trigger. In the loud sound, Huaisher suddenly felt darkness in front of him. The street lamps were flickering. He was stunned. He looked back in shock and saw the distribution box next to the fire hydrant already emitting thick smoke. Under the water column's turbulent irrigation, electric sparks and thick smoke crazily spurted out from it. Accompanied by the crazy flickering of the street lamps, there was a loud explosion. The street lamps were completely extinguished. Oh my God! What kind of tofu dregs project was this municipal engineering company doing? Chapter 14. In the darkness, Weisher once again felt a numbing chill on her forehead. It was a terrifying premonition that appeared in countless nightmares, a skill formed from countless experiences of death. Death premonition had been activated. He didn't have time to think. He suddenly lay down and rolled on the ground, crazily. He recalled the words that Crow had once said in his mind. Bitter and painful memories kept surging in his mind. Then there was a warm current in his right hand, and a handful of ashes was refined from the negative memories. In the loud sound of the ground shattering behind him, he held his breath and spread it out. There was a moment of silence. In the next second, he heard the shrill scream of the fierce ape. "Damn it, Light!" Yu Dongri shouted. "Light! Light! Light! Light!" Uffed. Although the situation was critical, Weisher couldn't hold back his laughter. "Sorry, I didn't expect you to be a King Intel." He didn't dare to dawdle. He took out Yu Dongri's phone from his handbag, turned on the flash, and threw it over. Catch! Pa! The phone shattered in midair. The fierce ape's face flashed in the swirling light. It seemed to have sensed Yu Dongri's power and wouldn't let go of any light. Weisher's hands did not stop moving. She threw out her almost retired smartphone. Catch it again. Pa! The phone was crushed in midair again. Well, now both of them had lost their phones. "Damn it, can't you slow down?" Yu Dongri was furious. The first phone he threw out was crushed, and the second one was thrown out. "It's fine if you move faster. Do you want to be faster or slower?" Weisher was also angry. As he fled in a panic, he kept pulling out bottles and jars from Yu Dongri's bag. "Hand cream, catch! Pa!" The phone was crushed. Then there was another gunshot. The muzzle flashed, but it wasn't clear whether it hit the strange monkey or not. Anyway, Weisher felt that his heel seemed to have been swept by something. He was so scared that he almost collapsed on the ground. "You should have been more accurate." "Shut up!" Yu Dongri shouted impatiently. "Do you still want your things?" Weisher was angry. He grabbed another bottle and threw it out. "I cream, catch! Pa!" Sunglasses and keys, catch! In the tense and fierce fight between Yu Dongri and the damn monkey, Weisher kept throwing things. The sound of things breaking Yu Dongri's heart constantly sounded in the air. In the end, the bag was almost empty, so Weisher simply threw it all at once. "Fairy water, I cream, and what is this?" Weisher took a look. A mirror. Catch! Even the ferocious ape was too lazy to pay attention to this pile of messy things. But it didn't expect that Yu Dongri would rush out and grab his mirror in midair. He didn't even care that the fierce ape was in front of him. In the blink of an eye, he caught it. Yu Dongri sneered at the ghost monkey in the dark. "Look at my beautiful face." The next moment, light burst out from his hand. It didn't expect that Weisher and the others were waiting here. Yu Dongri, this flamboyant guy, even had a light on his mirror, and it was a 360-degree white and soft LED circular light tube with no blind spots. In the instant light, the fierce ape's sharp iron claws were only a few feet away from Yu Dongri's face. At that moment, its movement came to an abrupt halt. For a moment, he couldn't care about anyone else. Even Weisher was tricked and accidentally saw his face. Then, as if frozen in place, he couldn't move. He screamed crazily. Yu Dongri didn't even adjust his posture while falling. He raised his gun and fired randomly. He emptied the last 2 bullets, but no blood spurted out, until he fell in a sorry state and almost hit the ground face first. He hurriedly got up. Then he heard the fierce ape's sharp cry. Its iron claws suddenly raised and clawed at his eyes. There was a muffled sound, and thick blood spurted out from the holes in the mask. This time, it couldn't see Yu Dongri's face anymore. It waved its arm and tore open a wound on Huaishi's arm. If Yu Dongri hadn't withdrawn his ability quickly, his neck would have been torn off. Huaishi's face was pale with fright. F***CK, Big Brother, is your ability useful or not? Yu Dongri was also indignant. I don't have much hair left. There's nothing I can do. So, your great beauty mainly depends on your hair. The two of them rolled and crawled to the side. They didn't even dare to breathe. They tried to maintain silence and not make any sound. In the silence, only the fierce ape with bleeding eyes kept wandering around. It tore apart everything that made a sound, until Huaishi heard a helpless sigh. Along with the sweeping of the strong wind, the dark clouds were shattered, and the moonlight illuminated the silent street. In front of the street, Ai Qing in a wheelchair was looking at them. She shook her head unhappily and slowly pushed the wheelchair forward. In the silence, only the sound of the wheelchair turning could be heard. The crazy, fierce ape screamed and suddenly turned its head. Its empty eyes stared in the direction of the sound. Pounce! Ai Qing shook her head impatiently and sighed. She took out a black, long, thick, and hard. Huaisha couldn't tell what model it was, a submachine gun. She skillfully pulled the safety. She aimed it forward and pulled the trigger. In an instant, Huaisha only saw a series of hot flashes spurt out from the barrel of the gun. In the sharp and sonorous sound, the fierce ape froze in midair. It shook crazily like a broken plastic bag floating in the wind. Finally, it fell to the ground, spasming and screaming in pain. After firing a magazine of bullets, Ai Qing indifferently pulled out the magazine and threw it to the side. Only the crisp sound of the shell falling to the ground could be heard. It's done. Just as Huaisha was stunned, the ragged monkey on the ground suddenly got up again and rushed to the side. It wanted to escape. Ai Qing didn't even bother to care. Then, a faint red appeared on the fierce ape's body. Bang! In an instant, a loud sound burst from the distance. Continuous rumbling sounds could be heard. The fierce ape seemed to have been struck by lightning. One of its legs suddenly exploded into a cloud of blood. Then, a large hole appeared in its chest. It was torn open from its back. Its internal organs spurted out like mud. Several large holes appeared on the ground. It was like a depression created by a hammer in an instant. Under the aim of the snipers in the distance, the monster instantly turned into a ragged doll. But what was incredible was that it was still alive. It struggled crazily. It used its hands and the remaining left leg to get up. It used its hands and feet to crawl out crazily. Its speed was incredible. In the end, it was almost floating on the ground. In an instant, it disappeared into the darkness under the continuous shooting. Until now, Yu Dongri finally breathed a sigh of relief. He sat on the ground, took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and took a few puffs to catch his breath. If Ai Qing didn't come quickly, he would have died here. But when did you call the snipers? They are so fast. Guess. Ai Qing didn't answer directly. She just looked at him as if he was an idiot. Yu Dongri sighed, helplessly. Well, it seemed that there was no need to call them. I'm afraid that there are many snipers taking turns to aim at me these 2 days. This woman is completely inhumane. I thought you could take care of it on your own. I didn't expect you to fall to the point where you are completely useless once the lights are turned off. Ai Qing mocked him mercilessly. She asked, "Did you find anything?" "I'm not sure about the soul's ability, but I seem to have seen its stigmata on the professor's genealogy chart." Yu Dongri scratched his head and thought for a while. It's probably qi. He thought for a while and became more certain. The third stage, the ether level stigmata, Chi, the legendary monster. It was said that its face was like a monkey, its body was like a raccoon, it had the limbs of a tiger and the tail of a snake. It could fly without wings. It seems that it just entered the ether level and can't fly too high. Otherwise, I would be dead today. Yu Dongri wiped the cold sweat off his face and panted. F***CK. A weakling who just entered the gold level, fought for half a day against an ether level higher than me, and still managed to survive. That was too close. Where did this ether level sublimator come from? I thought the professor was the only ether level in the whole of Shinhai. Even an ether level sublimator has appeared. This time, those guys really got themselves into big trouble. AI Ching looked into the distance with schadenfreude. She knocked on the armrest of the wheelchair. At least the situation is not that bad. Your efforts have paid off. When necessary, there are more people who can be used as scapegoats. Yu Dongri was silent, looking at the beautiful side profile. His heart chilled. To have such a horrible prosecutor, one could only say that life was hopeless. After a short moment of thought, AI Ching raised her head and asked, "Did you find anything else?" Nothing. Yu Dongri was taken aback, then shook his head furiously. "Then, let's continue with the operation. If I find any clues, I will let you know." She glanced at Yu Dongri one last time, then glanced at Huaishur, but didn't say anything else. She turned her wheelchair around and left. After a long silence, Huaishur finally reacted. "Does she not like me that much?" Yu Dongri rolled his eyes. "I've never seen her like anyone before, okay? But you probably offended her too much last time. You're on your own now." He patted the youth's shoulder forcefully, but his heart couldn't help but sink. This was the only thing that he had been hiding. In the instant that the street light went out, he had sensed a weak fluctuation of origin substance behind him. This kid might have a chance of ascending. In the secret room, the master saw the bloody ape and froze in place. "What's going on?" "This is a trap set up by the Astronomy Association." The ape screamed angrily. "That kid has an ascendant as his bodyguard, and a sniper." The master froze in place. "What are you still standing there for?" The ape endured the pain and tore off its mask, revealing an old, twisted face filled with malice. "I can't hold on much longer. Give me the origin substance. Now," the master subconsciously covered the box. But there's not much origin substance left. Don't you still have a lot of old things to draw from?" The ape crawled up from the bed, propped itself up on one leg, and pressed forward. "Give it all to me. This is all, because I was cleaning up your mess." The master subconsciously pulled out the box, but it was snatched away. It impatiently opened the box and stared at the clear, misty spring water inside. It pounced on the box and began to suck in large mouthfuls. Very quickly, a sharp grinding sound could be heard. The sound of bones and flesh multiplying sounded like steel clashing against each other. New organs and limbs began to grow out of the broken body. After all of the limbs had finished growing, the master impatiently snatched the box back. When he saw that the origin substance at the bottom of the box had decreased quite a bit, his face paled. "Where's the powder? Give me some too." The ape wiped its face, then pulled out a packet of powder from the master's pocket and inhaled it. After a moment of shuddering, its complexion improved. It staggered back a few steps and sat down on the bed. "You're the person chosen by the gods. What do you plan to do next?" The master was silent. He subconsciously nibbled on his fingers, as if he was thinking about something. After a long time, a savage expression flashed across his face. "Since the Astronomy Association has set their sights on us, We can't stay in Shanghai any longer." He opened his mouth and looked at his bloodied finger, then said hoarsely, "After the final mass tomorrow night, we'll change locations and leave through the night. There are still 6 months until the new year. If we work hard and gather enough origin substance, the gods won't blame us. What about the mission?" The ape asked, "What about the mission in the quarantine zone?" The master trembled. He didn't say anything. Chapter 15. Early in the morning, dew condensed on the bough, and traces of wetness appeared on the cello case. In such humid weather, it was reasonable to take good care of them, but Weischer didn't have the mood to do so. After practicing the cello for 2 hours and meditating as usual, he sat on the steps of the garden in a daze. Then he felt a chill on his, but "I'll just put a cushion here another day." After he couldn't sit anymore, he stood up, patted the dust off his pants, and strolled aimlessly around the bare garden. The stitches on his arm still hurt as he swung his arm. It reminded him once again how dangerous he was last night. No, it should be said that it deeply reminded him
stretched out
what
his
kind of
wings
situation
sympathetically
he was in now.
and patted
The
him on the
current
shoulder.
him
Was
at
far
least
from being
you
able
still
to
have a
guarantee
peaceful
his
life
own
in a
safety.
certain sense.
Although he often
Yes,
felt that
he
it was
ignored the
meaningless
fact
to
that he
continue
was so
living
poor
such a
that he had to
poor
work in a
and
brothel,
difficult life,
that he was
no one would feel that it was
inexplicably
better to be
chased by
alive
undead
than
on
to
the
be
road,
dead,
and that he was now
Besides,
living with a bald
Weischer's
cowherd
life hadn't
and
really
being
begun
used as
yet.
bait. For
It was
some
good to be
reason,
alive.
Thinking of this,
He wanted to stay a
Weischer
little
suddenly
longer.
thought of a girl he had
Are you
only
in the
seen
garden in a
twice,
daze
a girl
again?
in a wheelchair who
He
seemed to be
suddenly
only 2 or
heard the
3
sound
years
of
older
the
than
crow
him.
landing
AI
on the
Ching.
fence.
He
Can't you
seemed
go
to have
somewhere
seen her
else?
somewhere before.
Can I
But if
like
he
it?
thought about it
Then
carefully,
you have to work harder.
he didn't seem to have
Weischer,
any
the
similar
sublimation
memories in the
is
short
almost complete.
and empty first half
She
of his
sighed in
life.
disappointment
No matter what,
and raised
no
her
one would
wings.
forget such
Just
a
a little bit
beautiful
more.
young lady sitting in a
Weisher
wheelchair,
couldn't raise his
right?
spirits at all.
He scratched his head.
What's the use
But
of
no
the
matter how
sublimation?
hard he thought,
Can you
he
sprinkle
couldn't
more
remember.
chili powder?
It wasn't
no matter
until
how
the sound of a
powerful it
car
is,
horn at the door
it can't be
reminded him
compared
to
to
go
the
to
one
work
last
that
night.
he reluctantly
How many
picked up
times have
the
I
piano
said that
case,
the
and
calamity
walked out.
ash is just
The
a
half-assed
byproduct
coward
of your
Weisher
soul
ushered in a
attribute?
new day of torment.
Once the
And
sublimation
then,
is complete,
of course, he got into
the
trouble.
power of your
Didn't
soul
you come to
will
work
have a
here to
breakthrough.
sell?
Besides,
Why are you
do
pretending
really
to be a
think
wolf
that the
in
monkey
sheep's clothing
yesterday really
in
relied
front
on
of
his
you,
own ability?
Dong-ri, the lean woman
Oh,
who was old
the
enough to
sacred
be
mark in the
Weisher's
Ingzhou
mother,
monogatary
angrily
genealogy
pointed
belongs
at
to the
Weisher
third stage of
behind him,
etherization,
and suddenly threw a glass of
Crow looked
wine
at
at him
I've
meaningfully.
opened more than a
Ascension
dozen
is just the
champagne
beginning.
towers here.
Why can't he come over,
Ascenders with
and have
great
a few drinks
potential
with me?
usually
Do you
awaken
really
at the age
think
of
you're a
11
fairy?
or 12.
Call your manager
You're
out.
already
I
a
don't
step
F
behind.
asterisk king
So
believe
don't
it
slack
today.
off.
In the
Perhaps
chaos,
you wish to return to
Weisher
tranquility
laughed
after
dryly
this.
at the back,
But I
not
think you
knowing
must
what to
first
say.
understand
In the
that
end,
the owner of the
he
Book
was
of
pushed out
Destiny
in a
is
flurry.
destined to step on
After
the
a
path
while,
to the peak of
you
this world.
Dong-ri
Finally settled
wealth,
the trouble,
and beauties
after
are
searching
all within
for a long
reach.
time. But it is
He found
impossible for
Weisher
them
waiting
to
for
have
lunch
a peaceful life
in front of the pancake stall at the
Weisher was
back door of the
silent
clubhouse.
for a long time.
This guy had been
before
arrogant
he held the notebook
since he had
in
an
his
allowance
hand.
of 800
Is it
yuan
too
a day.
late for me
He even
to
dared
throw
to buy
this thing away
pancakes with two
Crow
ham
thought
sausages.
for a moment,
And
he
suddenly
looked so
became
happy
excited.
that you
Although
Dong-ri,
I don't
who
recommend
was
you do
originally
this.
depressed,
This has
couldn't
never
help
happened
but
before
click
in
his
history.
tongue in amazement.
I'm very curious what
How
will
did you
happen
get
when
6
the time
complaints
comes on the
Why
second
don't you
day
give
of
it a
work.
try?
Weisher
rolled
his
his
eyes
eyes
for a long time
and asked
So,
tentatively,
since you can't resist,
maybe it's because
just
I'm
enjoy
good
it.
looking? Weisher, you Dong-ri sighed. You've been splashed with wine and scratched on your face. Why do you look like you're fine? What can I do? Weisher looked at him blankly. When we go back, kick her in the ass and tell her not to bully a poor young man. Besides, it's all expected. What's there to be angry about? If I was angry about this, I would have died 4 or 5 years ago. Yu Dongri was speechless. He could only say, this guy always has some unexpected strengths in strange aspects. Ever since he made things difficult for Weisher at work, there had been a lot of annoying things, but he had never seen this guy throw a tantrum or flip the table. Even when he was splashed with wine, he just smiled and moved to the side. He did not fight back when he was hit or scolded. Although he talked dirty in private, his patience was so good that it made people speechless. For an optimist to be so happy to such an extent, it made people wonder if he was an idiot or something else. Looking at him smiling and waiting for the pancakes, Yu Dongri didn't know why, but he always felt a little irritated. He always felt like he was forcing a good girl into prostitution and bullying an honest person. His conscience had been greatly damaged. Don't wait. Let's go. Yu Dongri pulled him back to change clothes. We don't have to work in the afternoon. I'll take you to eat something good. Are you serious? You finally have a conscience. Weisher was surprised. Then when are you going to pay the electricity bill? Yu Dongri was going up the stairs and almost twisted his waist. He looked back and glared. I can be your bodyguard for free, but why do I have to pay the electricity bill? You want to use the water heater. Weisher said, Can I take a cold shower? Hey, do you have a conscience? I was injured to save you yesterday. Besides, taking a cold shower is bad for the skin. Yeah, it's also bad for the hair. Weisher, who was following behind, added, It was visible to the naked eye that Lu Dongli, who was on the stairs, staggered and almost rolled down. When changing clothes, Weisher specially wore sunglasses and a huge mask to cover his face. He looked like an outlaw who was ready to cause trouble at any time. It couldn't be helped. It was one thing to work in a brothel, but it was another thing to be seen and photographed by classmates. It wasn't easy to fool them last time. This time, he couldn't be recognized. Unfortunately, things often didn't work according to one's will. Weisher, who was always unlucky, had just stepped out when he heard shouts behind him. Is it Little Sure? It's Little Sure.
Chapter 16. Is it Xiao Shi? It's Xiao Shi. Before Huai Shi could react, he saw a thin woman standing behind him. Her face was a little sallow, and she was wearing a plush hat in the summer, but he couldn't see any trace of hair. Sister-in-law. After not seeing her for a while, Huai Shi couldn't recognize her. He wasn't sure if she was Lao Yang's wife, the black-hearted intermediary. She could be said to be the last conscience of Lao Yang's family. In the past, when Huai Shi saw her, she was still a beauty with waist-length black hair and a rosy complexion. But now, her long hair had fallen out during the chemotherapy, and her face was unbelievably weak. Only her smile was still warm and warm. "Hey, your brother Yang said you were working here these 2 days." I didn't believe it, but I didn't expect it to be true. Without waiting for Huai Shi to speak, she walked up with one hand holding the vegetables and the other holding Huai Shi. "You haven't eaten yet, right? Let's go. It's your brother Yang's birthday today. Let's eat at home." Half an hour later, separated by the boiling hot pot on the table, Huai Shi and Lao Yang looked at each other in silence. After a long time, Lao Yang glanced at his wife, who was busy in the kitchen. He turned around and said faintly, "I asked you to come, and you really came, isn't that so?" Huai Shi slapped his knee. "Didn't you say you were going to treat me to a meal? I was just being polite, don't take it seriously. Then what about the matter of you stuffing me into the cowherd's nest? Isn't that a misunderstanding?" Lao Yang rolled his eyes to the ceiling. "Besides, aren't you very happy doing it? Even your colleagues came. It can be seen that horses of great talent are common, but Bo Lu is rare. That's enough from you." Huai Shi was angry at the mention of this matter. If this grandson didn't have a conscience for a little intermediary fee, would Huai Shi be so unlucky now? "Is it time to eat? I'm hungry." Yu Dongri, who was sitting in the corner of the living room, raised his head and asked. This grandson was also the kind of person who would not stand on ceremony with others. When someone invited him to a meal, he would not hesitate to follow. At this moment, he was squatting in front of the fish tank and playing with Lao Yang's feed. Lao Yang was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "Hey, I'm coming. I've kept everyone waiting. Come, let's eat." The sister-in-law came out of the kitchen with the cut vegetables and called Yu Dongri to eat with her. She also prepared the dipping sauce for them. Looking at Lao Yang's unhappy expression, she glared at him. "Xiao Shi, it's not easy for you to come to our door. Who are you throwing your face at? Hey, is this Shika-chan's colleague? You look so handsome. Come, let's eat." After being glared at by his wife, Lao Yang was no longer angry. He listlessly added a piece of meat and dipped it in. He muttered that Huai Shi did not give him a commission this time. Together with Lao Yang's angry face, Huai Shi enjoyed the meal. After the meal, Lao Yang was sent to the kitchen to wash the dishes. Huai Shi sat in the living room and chatted with the sister-in-law. Her complexion was much better than before. It seemed that the money Lao Yang had gone against his conscience to get was useful. Live one day at a time. The sister-in-law ignored Huai Shi's dissuasion and lit a cigarette indifferently. "It's fine that this illness is tormenting me alone, but it also caused Lao Yang to suffer so much. I feel bad in my heart." "How can you say that?" Lao Yang eavesdropped in the kitchen and poked his head out. He was immediately furious. "Li Xueme, what are you doing? What did the doctor say?" "Put out the cigarette. Immediately. Immediately. What did you say?" The sister-in-law looked back at him. Lao Yang's legs went soft and his voice lowered. "Please put out the cigarette." "That's more like it." The sister-in-law looked at Huai Shi proudly and threw the cigarette into the ashtray. She whispered to Huai Shi, "Did you see that? In the future, if he cheats you of money, just tell me. I'll teach him a lesson." Okay. Huaishi's eyes lit up. He could only say that there was always an antidote within 100 steps of a poisonous snake. In this world, there was always something to overcome another. After the meal and the dishes were washed, Lao Yang, who was still wearing an apron, finally got what he wanted. He sent the two guys who came to eat for free out the door. Along the way, he glared at Yu Dongri, who was showing off in front of his wife. After sending him to call a taxi, he looked back at Huaishi. His expression was strange. What's wrong? Huaishi subconsciously took a step back. His first reaction was that this grandson was angry and wanted to hit someone. Lao Yang stared at him suspiciously for a long time. He pulled him over and asked in a low voice, "You didn't offend anyone, did you?" Huh. Huaishi was alert. Then he heard Lao Yang say, "Last night, someone asked me about you and gave me a lot of money. You didn't say anything, right?" Huaishi became nervous. Lao Yang rolled his eyes. "Nonsense. If I didn't say anything, am I still human? Then wait." Huaishi looked up. "What did you say?" Lao Yang, who had just sold him out, sighed and raised 5 fingers. "The person gave 50,000 yuan to buy information about you. Even if I didn't give him, you think he couldn't find out from your school? You brat, think carefully. What shameful things have you done recently?" Even though he already knew this guy's character, Huaishi still couldn't resist the urge to hit him. Then he saw Lao Yang lift his apron and stuff 2 rolls of money into Huaishi's pocket. Huaishi touched it and was stunned. It was 2 thick rolls of cash. The thickness was at least 20,000 yuan. "This time, it's your brother's fault. I'm sorry. I'm really short on money. If you're angry, you can hit me." He lowered his head and begged for mercy. "Take the money and go somewhere else to play for a few days. Don't come back first. I'll ask around and call you when it's over." Huaishi didn't expect this bastard to have a conscience. For a moment, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. He didn't know what to say. After being cheated so many times, he finally saw some money. He was actually a little touched. Although he wanted to hit him, he felt a little helpless when he thought of his sister-in-law's pale face. Forget it. They had been in the same boat for so many years. If he didn't cheat him, would he watch his wife die? He asked one last question. "Who's asking about me?" "Those people didn't say. They're just pretending." Lao Yang smoked and snorted coldly. "Do you think I'm stupid and don't even know how to check the license plate number? I think it's a charity fund or something. The name is scary. I think it's called—" He scratched his head for a long time, then slapped the back of his head, and finally remembered. Philanthropy and charity. 2 hours later, Huaishi sat in the armored vehicle and looked at the soldiers around him, who were armed to the teeth. He was dumbfounded. What the hell? What's going on? What should I do? The familiar 3 questions of life once again filled his head. Chapter 17. After Yu Dongri called AI Qing to report about the charity, a series of dazzling operations appeared. Within 10 minutes, a black car drove up to him. 2 people politely invited them to get in and took them to the strange agency where he was interrogated last time. By the time he entered the door, the so-called charity and public welfare had already been stripped bare. In the conference room, the middle-aged man who had interrogated Huaishi last time had an ugly expression on his face and did not say a word. AI Qing was the only one who was flipping through the documents that were still warm in her hands. Soon, she raised her eyes and said, "This is a lot of juicy news. It's obvious that this is a shell company used to launder money, but there are so many donors. Many of them are prominent figures in the city. No wonder the Special Affairs Division couldn't find anything after so long. Will there be a leak this time?" The middle-aged man coughed and said dryly, The Special Affairs Department is special, the other departments are other departments. It would have been better if you did this earlier. Why did you have to work like a horse for those old men? AI Ching looked up and glanced at him. How many people are involved in this? Quite a lot, the middle-aged man sighed. According to the investigation, this foundation regularly invites some masters to give positive energy lessons to the donors and share the experience of sublimating the soul and maintaining health. Most of the content is unreliable meditation and self-hypnosis. AI Ching and the middle-aged man at the front of the conference national studies seem to have finished exchanging some conditions. AI Ching after getting AI Ching's promise not to expand the scope of the attack. The middle-aged man's face really related to this case. A voice came from the walkie-talkie on the table, right? The operatives are in position. The Special Affairs Department, the middle-aged man, is the Special Affairs Department. At AI, the middle-aged man pick up the signal. Repeated, the operation will begin. There's no need to test anything. Instantly lit up. We still know what's right and what's wrong. Make out. Please rest assured. From a head-mounted camera in the back. All she could see quietly was a group of people armed from head to toe with guns and cannons in their hands. After receiving the order, his eyes. The car door opened, low voice, and a group of Astronomy Association is a department of anti-terrorist units. Its members are all over the world of attack, and its main purpose was no hesitation in border corruption and in less than 2 minutes. They had taken control of the entire parking lot. As long as it has anything to do to the surveillance sublimators or border relics, a group of people she has the right to intervene. Inside after she outside of the office an official employee. They pulled down the gate. All she has to do is sign a black pulled letter, up the cordon, and she can even kill the signal and optical fiber. What do you think? We're completely so cut powerful. Off. Only through the shaking of the helmet's view. Even Dongxiao is willing see the scenery. The main members of the governing body of the Astronomical Society are. Is there a need to be so dramatic? Okay. This was obviously the busiest place. This is called taking care of yourself. High City. The ground, several dozen floors below, was filled with people. It was the busiest time before the end of the summer break. No one would have thought that there was an ambush happening right above their heads. Just outside the door of the corridor, he quietly set up a broken door stake. After the order was given, there was a loud explosion. Amidst the explosion, before the people inside the room could react, several stun grenades were tossed into the room. After a flash of light and a loud bang, the armed soldiers rushed in and instantly took control of the outer layer of the building. The rest of the people barged in through the door. First, there was a scream, followed by 2 loud gunshots. Then there was a scream, and finally there was a shrill voice. "Don't shoot! I surrender! I surrender!" Soon, in the camera's view, a middle-aged man was dragged out. His leg was shot. His face was covered in tears and snot, but he screamed, "I surrender! I surrender! I will confess. I will confess everything. It was my master who ordered me to do this. I don't know anything. I really don't know anything." After a moment of chaos, the captain reported to the camera he is transferring money. All his liquid funds have been transferred overseas. He found a plane ticket to France in the office he was preparing to run. Inside the shocked meeting room, the middle-aged man's expression turned ugly. If there was still a possibility of misunderstanding before, now there was probably something fishy going on. "Interrogate him." The middle-aged man almost broke the pen in his hand and ordered hatefully, "Interrogate him clearly." 10 minutes later, the pen in his hand was really broken. Wang Hai, nicknamed Wang Hai Toad, the toad with dysentery. This was the name of his master. According to the files in the public security system, this guy began to engage in superstition and amass wealth more than 20 years ago. He cheated pensions from old men and old women. He was caught twice and then disappeared. When he appeared again, he became Pastor Wang of the Society of Savior of the Father. His business was huge and out of control, and the person caught in the office was one of his many disciples, Tu Tai, who was in charge of the facade and money laundering. After cleaning up the money his master cheated, he changed it into bearer bonds and valuables. Tu Tai, who graduated from a famous school, joined for the money. He looked down on his master and secretly embezzled a lot of money. As for Wang Hai, he had always kept a lot of secrets from his disciples. The only one he trusted was his eldest disciple, who had always been by his side. Both sides had always been using each other and had common interests, so they lived in harmony. Now that a disaster was about to befall them, Tu Tai decisively gave up his master. As long as there was a question, he would not hide anything. He even took the initiative to confess a lot of things, including the forbidden drug business that his master had been secretly doing all this time, and the miracle that he had coincidentally stumbled upon. Miracle? The chief interrogator asked. Yes, miracle. Tu Tai drank a mouthful of water and wiped his cold sweat. Wang Hai has been hiding a box. I don't know what is inside. Every time he leads people to pray, he will hide the box under the pulpit. After opening it, there will be a very nice smell. After smelling it, you will feel refreshed and not be afraid of anything difficult. Those who come to my class don't know. They all think he is some kind of master. Bah, he is an old swindler. I suspect that the forbidden drugs he took out are related to that thing. Box. AI Ching could not help but look at Huai Shi. Finally, it was the right match. Huai Shi also heaved a sigh of relief. The mastermind had finally been caught, and she no longer had to live in fear. He could finally return to the normal track of life, get promoted, get rich, marry a beautiful woman, and set foot on the peak of life. The people in the conference room were no longer interested in listening to the rest of the words. Only Huai Shi was interested in the follow-up. He wanted to ask Tu Tai to explain in detail how his master blessed the female believer. Hey, you even installed a camera? Tell me honestly, where did you put the hard drive? But soon, they received bad news. Wang Hai was going to run away. Tu Tai, who had a keen sense of smell, always knew that this business would not last long. He always paid attention to the news from all sides. When he found that there was a change in his master's account, he felt that something bad was going to happen. With the intention of being prepared, he immediately booked a ticket to France. He planned to go out for 2 days to see what was going on, but it was already too late. Now Wang Hai was holding his last prayer at Laoding Town outside of Xanhai. It looked like he was going to run away that night. To prevent any accidents from happening, they had to act as soon as possible. But AI Ching fell into silence. She seemed to have thought of something that was hard to answer. She spaced out like there was no one around her. No matter how the people around her urged her, she did not say anything. After a long time, she raised her head and sighed deeply. Her expression was dark. Indeed, many things have been connected. Yes, all the clues are correct, but something does not feel right. She suddenly turned her head around. Her slender eyes stared at the young man behind her. Is there something that you have not told us? Yes, I have hidden many things, things like the crow, the book of destiny, the awakening. How can I tell you these things that will cause trouble? No. Huai Shi shook his head firmly. I have told you everything that I can. I have told you everything that I cannot tell you. His expression was impassioned, like he was ready to sacrifice himself at any moment, but his heart was very weak. He was afraid that AI Ching would ask Yu Dongri to ask him again. What if the Book of Destiny was summoned? From the crow's tone, it sounded like something very dangerous. Before the binding was undone, Huai Shi did not dare expose himself. As if believing his words, AI Ching silently pulled her gaze back. Then let's start the operation immediately. She looked at the middle-aged man. However, to avoid other unexpected situations. Even though time is tight before we carry out the plan, it is better for us to find out what this so-called Society of the Savior of God is up to. After all, this is related to relics from the border. No one knows what they are hiding. Furthermore, Aren't their ascendants hiding among them? This is all necessary information. The middle-aged man was confused. Miss AI, what do you mean? AI Ching looked behind her and did not say anything. The middle-aged man saw Yu Dongri and immediately understood something. He stood up and shook hands with him, saying warmly, "On behalf of the Special Affairs Division, I would like to thank Mr. Liu for his help and support." What? Yu Dongri was dumbfounded. He did not know what was going on, but he instinctively felt that it was going to be bad. Don't mess around. Before he could finish, AI Ching interrupted him. It just so happens that other than Yu Dongri, there is also a civilian volunteer who has dealt with him before and is willing to cooperate with us. As she spoke, AI Ching looked at Huai Shi, who was gloating behind them. If the two of them go in first, it will definitely not be a problem. Huai Shi's smile froze on his face. He suddenly jumped up and became a tragic recorder. I'm not. We're just going to investigate. With so many people as backup, we won't necessarily die. You said it yourself. Huai Shi protested indignantly. Didn't we agree to be bait? Why did we suddenly sneak behind the enemy's back? Isn't it very common for the client to change their requirements? AI Ching rested her chin on her palm and looked at him calmly. At most, I'll give you another 800 yuan in allowance. Huai Shi was suddenly angry. Forget 800 yuan. Even if it's 8,000. Before he finished speaking, a beep came from his waist. 8,000 yuan in Alipay. Huai Shi froze for a moment, and his expression suddenly stiffened. Do you think this little money can make me bow my head? Beep. There was another beep, and the soft female voice reminded him again. 8,000 yuan in Alipay. This is a life-threatening situation. What if I really die? Huai Shi's eyes widened. Don't you even have a pension? AI Ching retracted her gaze. Her phone shook, and the last transfer was sent out. 700 yuan in Alipay. 700 yuan. Why is the pension only 700 yuan? I gave 16,000 yuan before. Why did I only get so little when I died? Huai Shi didn't know whether he should be angry or sad. Should he ask her to give him more? Little brother, 700 yuan is already a lot. Yu Dongri next to him came over and sighed. After you get the coupon, you can sell an environmental protection package for the crematorium in the eastern suburbs. You'll also get a box. Remember to give a 5-star rating and send a wreath. Before you order, leave a message to choose the style. After all, you'll be staying for a long time. Choose something you like. 10 minutes later, Huai Shi and Yu Dongri were stuffed into the armored car and set off on the road to Laotang town with a tragic mood. When they set off, he inexplicably shivered. It was like falling into an ice cave. Chapter 18. In the carriage that was disguised as a cold chain transport vehicle, Huai Shi looked around restlessly. He felt that the people sitting next to him were a little familiar. In the end, he finally realized who they were and pointed at the person opposite him. Hey, were you the one who injected the needle into my neck last time? The person opposite him raised his eyes and glanced at him as if he didn't want to talk to him. He didn't even want to throw a dog at him. The cold aura of escorting a death row prisoner made Huai Shi particularly uneasy. Sir, I want to go to the toilet. The soldier opposite him reached out and pointed at a bucket in the corner of the carriage. I want to take a dump. The soldier opposite him still reached out and pointed at the bucket without moving. It was the same whether it was a large one or a small one. In the shaking carriage, Huai Shi's expression twitched. He tried to lean back and stay away from the bucket, and prayed that the contents inside would not spill out. Soon he reacted. That's not right. Those bastards have seen our faces. How are we going to investigate? I'm afraid we'll be sent to our door as soon as we enter. Yu Dongri next to him took out 2 things that looked like face masks and threw one over. Polymer plastic mask. Ding! Huaisher dubbed in his mind, received legendary item, human skin mask X1. He curiously looked at the thing in his hand and immediately became curious. It was fine that he was sent here, but why did you Dongri also come here? To reduce my sentence. Lu Dongli crossed his legs and smoked. After this, I'll be free. From now on, I'll be a fish in the sea and a bird in the sky. In the silence, Huaisher looked at him with pity. You know that if you say something like that in the movie, you'll definitely die in the last mission, right? You've had enough fun. It doesn't matter if you die, but I haven't lived long enough. You said I'm a virgin, but I don't even have any hope of escaping poverty. Isn't that a bit too much? Don't worry. Yu Dongri patted him on the shoulder and gestured with the cigarette in his hand. The mission is very simple. Sneak in and get information. It's best if you can sneak into the scene and take down that bastard on the spot. If you feel that something is wrong, you will send out the alarm. More than 100 strong men will come in with guns and cannons to save you. What are you afraid of? Huaisher looked at the strong men around him and felt a little relieved. Do they have any experience in rescuing hostages? Why didn't you bring any negotiators? Aha, don't worry. Yu Dongri chuckled. The Special Affairs Department's Sublimata Suppression Force never negotiates. They always deal with the kidnappers and hostages together. So, have you chosen your box yet? I recommend the one with the red-crowned crane. It looks grand. Huaisher rolled his eyes. It was completely hopeless. At 4:30 in the afternoon, the car stopped at the back door of a butcher shop in Laotang town. Under the shop owner's orders, 2 people disguised as porters walked out of the inner compartment and carried 2 cartons of pork into the shop. The meat was real, the shop was real, and even the car was real. If they checked, they could even find the serial number on the transport company's website. It was just a temporary replacement for the car that was scheduled to deliver the goods today. After delivering the goods, the driver stopped the car on the pretext of eating. After taking Huaisher and Yu Dongri out for a while, he sat in the restaurant and looked at porn. He waved his hand casually, indicating that the 2 people in the distance were free to move. What do we do? Huaisher looked around, dumbfounded. Yu Dongri patted him on the shoulder. Stay here and don't walk around. I'll go buy you an orange tree. Then he flipped his hair and walked to the street. He grabbed an old lady and chatted with her. It was unknown whether the cowherd's talent was too outstanding or his affinity was too amazing. After a while, they were already calling each other elder sister and younger brother. The old lady was beaming with joy. She took this young man all the way to God knows where. Only Huaisher was left in the same place. He was confused. The 3 questions in life filled his mind. He didn't know what to do. If you want me to sneak in, you have to tell me how to do it. How can you just leave me here? Huaisher covered his face. He heard the sound of wings flapping. A crow landed on the wall. Before he had time to be surprised, the crow's voice sounded in his mind. Don't talk. You're bugged. What the hell? Huaisher's eyes widened. Are you stupid? Little brother, you're being monitored. The crow sighed. It's not your fault. That little girl's intuition is too sharp. To be honest, your identity is also a bit suspicious. If I knew earlier, I wouldn't have suggested you cooperate with the Astronomy Society. After all, I'm still on the run. What the hell? Huaisher's eyes widened. On the run. The crow looked at him in confusion. Ah, I'm a fugitive wanted by the Astronomy Society. I remember that I'm quite high up on the list. Didn't I tell you? What the hell are you talking about? Now, I'm a traitor, you're a fugitive, and this group of superstitious scammers are all taken care of. I'll be sent to prison, you'll be shot, and those guys will be sentenced. Everyone will have a bright future. Don't worry. She's not sure yet. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let you out to make you give yourself away. Listen to me. You'll be fine this time. Huaisher rolled his eyes. He had completely lost hope in his teammates. Please, I beg you, let me play solo. He sighed. He didn't want to talk to this stupid bird anymore. He got up and walked down the street. As far as he could see, it was a normal scene. It was filled with a sense of decay. The streets were filled with old people. There were very few young people walking around. They had probably gone out to work. It was understandable. After all, Xian Hai's economic situation was not good recently. After all, the last time it was considered a metropolis was 70 or 80 years ago. It was a miracle that it remained on the map after so long. Young people with some ambition probably went to work in Yanjing, Jinling, or Yangzhou. According to rumors, the new cabinet wanted to develop the coastal economy, but the environment was not as good as the inland, right? At this point, Huaisher simply threw all thoughts of the undercover mission to the back of her mind and strolled around the streets with her hands in her hands. The afternoon sun shone down on the ground, making people feel warm and comfortable. In a trance, Huaisher seemed to see the whole town shake like a reflection in the water. Countless shadows appeared in the sky, but soon the strange illusion disappeared and everything returned to normal. All that was left was cold sweat and chills. There was something wrong with this place, right? The target has started to move. Following the report from the surveillance, inside the giant truck outside the town, inside the temporary command center, everyone was shocked. They put on their earphones and looked at the screen. On the screen, other than the surveillance cameras that were connected to the town, the enlarged image in the middle was Huaisher, who was walking around with nothing to do. In the long silence, everyone watched as Huaisher wandered around like a bored idler. No matter how they looked at it, it didn't look like he was undercover. He was shivering like he had run into a ghost, compared to Lu Dongli, who was like a fish in water and had already entered the group of old female friends. Huaisher was simply slacking off. There was nothing suspicious about him at all. Just as everyone was speechless, another report came from the front. The target has started to. Before the voice could finish, it stopped abruptly. In the video, Huaisher ran to a convenience store and used her undercover salary to buy a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. She even splurged and bought a 5 yuan ice cream. Then he squatted on the steps under the sun and started to walk around. The smell of salted fish with 900% salinity hit them in the face. This guy was hopeless, right? AI Qing's calm expression couldn't help but twitch. She began to reflect from the bottom of her heart. Was there something wrong with this salted fish hiding something from her? How did the enthusiastic and lively child from back then become like this in just a few years? Could it be that the chainsaw of time was too uncanny? Seeing Huaisher's limited time, the people in the command center didn't know what to say. Some people looked at AI Qing and wanted to ask if they should urge her, but AI Qing didn't say anything from beginning to end. Forget it. It didn't matter whether he was there or not. There were a lot of things to do now. Not only did they have to investigate the interpersonal relationships in Laoheng town in just a few hours, but they also had to check the surveillance footage to see if there were any clues. The depth detector had already entered the site and was being installed closely. They didn't have time to waste on salted fish. In the midst of the bustle, Huaisher's eavesdropping device sounded from afar. "Young man, yes, you, come over here." In the image, Huaisher was called over by a group of old men pushing a trolley. "Yes, it's you. Whose kid is this? Come over and help." Huaisher was stunned for a long time. She held the remaining wooden stick in her hand and seemed to finally remember her undercover job. She reluctantly went to help the group of old men unload the cart. It took her a lot of effort to get the cart into a yard near the border. Then She was ordered to move a pile of broken gongs, drums, and costumes down from the cart and put them away in different categories. There seemed to be some sort of meeting going on in the courtyard. A group of dark-skinned old men were sitting on the ground, happily talking about something. There were also people sitting around the table playing cards. In the corner, there was a pot of boiling water. All that was missing was a few tables set up to set up a banquet. There seemed to be food to eat. Huaishi's eyes lit up. He retracted the half of his foot that had stepped out. It was impossible for him to be undercover. It was impossible for him to be undercover in this lifetime. He might as well eat peacefully. He didn't ask for more meat, as long as there was enough rice. As a result, Huaishi waited for a long time, but there was no signal for the cafeteria to open. He saw the 7 or 8 old men sitting on the ground pick up the broken gongs, pipa, and suona and began to play some tune of 2-people rotation. When he found that there was an unfamiliar audience looking at him, the old man playing the suona in the middle became more and more energetic. After playing for a long time, he proudly waved the instrument in his hand at Huaishi. Did he mean to say, "Are you looking at me? You should be jealous." Huaishi's heart did not waver. He clapped his hands dryly and even wanted to laugh a little. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't bring anything to eat today, he would have let this old man see what an 8th grade ABRSM performance was like. Not to mention, after combining it with meditation, his cello's appeal was unbelievably strong. If he put in a little more effort, your cow would cry. Unexpectedly, the group of old men became more energetic. They played one tune after another at Huaishi. The saliva in the suona flew a few meters away. He didn't know what kind of black technology they used to connect to a subwoofer, but Huaishi's back molars were almost shaken out. After they finished, they even raised their chin at Huaishi provocatively. "Young man, how about a piece?" "Okay, I'll show you what I've got today." Huaishi curled his lips. It seemed that reality didn't allow him to keep a low profile anymore. He casually rummaged through the pile of broken instruments and found an eru that could be played. He crossed his legs and didn't care about keeping a low profile anymore. The first thing he did was to play a remix of Horse Race, Moon Reflection, Bach a cappella, Above the Moon, and Pomp and Circumstance. Due to the limited equipment, there were many parts that were out of tune. Huaishi could only imitate that pervert Paganini and try to play a tune with one string. However, she did not expect that after she finished playing, she would open her eyes and see a bunch of black heads in front of her. The group of old men who were playing cards, chatting, smoking, and playing the piano had gathered together at some point in time. They were pointing at him with a solemn and serious expression. "It's over." Huaishi's heart tightened. Could it be that I've been exposed? A few old men were talking to each other. The one in the middle looked at Huaishi with a puzzled expression. Where did this young man come from? Why haven't I seen him before? I'm new. I'm working here. Huaishi subconsciously got up and wanted to run. I'm leaving. Don't worry." The old man grabbed Huaishi's shoulder and laughed happily. It was as if he was trapped in the toilet and someone came to give him toilet paper. That bastardly Lausen didn't come. Today, our gospel class is short of someone who can play the eru. Come with us to the church performance tonight. I'll give you 40 yuan per performance, including dinner. Okay? Church? Art performance? Wait a minute. How did he get inside so quickly? Huaishi was dumbfounded. He subconsciously wanted to refuse, but when he remembered that he was still under surveillance, he could only grit his teeth and nod. Okay, he paused for a moment and made a condition. "But I have to eat first." Feeling the sudden chill at the back of his head, Huaishi seemed to be able to imagine the scene of death crawling on his back with a grin. However, What did this have to do with him being a ruthless negative energy production machine? Let's talk about going on the road after I'm full. Only Huaishir could not help but curse in his heart. What the hell is that lunatic called Wang Hai doing? Holding a sermon like the Diyun Society, and they even need people to warm up the atmosphere. Why are they so ostentatious? Why don't they go and be a little fresh meat? Before he had the time to think further, a row of old ladies dressed in festive floral clothes came up to the stage from backstage. They gathered around a person and chatted about the postures and techniques of square dancing. Sisters, remember, the rhythm here is not dong cha-cha, but dong cha-cha. The leader smiled and even stroked her hair in a showy manner. She looked back and smiled flirtatiously. Then she froze on the spot, looking at Huaishir. Huaishir was also looking at her, dumbfounded. Damn, why is it you? Huaishir was just thinking about how to get in touch with this guy. She didn't expect that before she could even get in touch with him, the gospel twosome, with the cowherd Lu Dongli leading the dance and the traitor Huaishir playing the piano, had already started their performance. Joy and music blossomed as the two of them looked at each other with complicated expressions. Huaishir opened his mouth silently. Where's my orange tree? I haven't bought it yet. Have you eaten? No, I've eaten. Huaishir patted his stomach. There's white bread and red braised pork. Are you jealous? F***CK. Yu Dongri suddenly wanted to curse, but the curtain at the front stage had been opened. He could only force a warm smile and dance with the old men in the country disco, just in front of Yu Dongri. The old sister, who was the first to be stopped by him, twisted a floral handkerchief and sang, "Entering God's home, sitting beside God. The sweetness is better than our mother's. Hallelujah to heaven." Huaishir could not help but laugh. Beep. The phone in his pocket vibrated. A text message had been sent. He took out his phone with one hand and saw AI Ching's number on the screen, and the content of the text message. Retreat immediately. Closed. 5. At that moment, the aura of death that was far stronger than usual surged and almost drowned Huaishir. 10 minutes ago, in the temporary command center, AI Ching's expression was gloomy. Soul radiation recording tape completed. Normal. Depth index 0. 17. Normal. Border erosion rate is 0. 3%. Normal. 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 All the observation data was normal, but for some reason, her expression became more and more unsightly until finally there was a trace of anger. What's wrong? The middle-aged man asked. Something's wrong. AI Ching's slender fingers clenched the armrest of the wheelchair. Her eyes were gloomy. There's definitely something wrong. While everyone was still in a state of shock, she reached out and took out the phone from the pocket of the wheelchair. She directly opened the back case and pulled out the red plug that looked like a phone card. In the silence, the middle-aged man was stunned and stood up subconsciously. Are you crazy? Every inspector's phone was a special model provided by the Astronomy Society, not to mention the strong signal and power. The internal application and data were also reasonable. The most important and crucial thing was the red highest alert on the back of the phone. Only when an inspector confirmed that a matter was beyond his ability and would bring about a B-level border hazard or above would he have the authority to activate this function. Whether it was a fire beacon or a life-saving talisman, few inspectors would choose to use it. Once this function was activated, the signal would directly connect to the United Nations Astronomy Society's direct authority, the Special Situation Countermeasures Room of the administration. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it could reach the heavens. If the situation was serious, it would even alarm the Group of 10 committee. If AI Ching was an official prosecutor, She could even mobilize an A-level sacred corpse or directly mobilize the manpower of all the ascendants in the entire East China Sea region. Of course, there was a price to pay for such an exaggeration. If someone found out that she was playing the wolf, the consequences would be obvious. But the most important thing for everyone present was that once the matter was reported to the Astronomy Society, all the deals and guarantees made to cover up the matter would naturally come to nothing. Flipping the table right before victory, what was this woman trying to do? She was really crazy. It was just a small matter involving relics at the border. Why did she have to directly report it to the administration? It was like the leaders of two counties directly calling the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection after a disagreement. Wasn't she making a mountain out of a molehill? Moreover, there was no evidence or sign at all, nor was there any sign that something was wrong. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. But compared to the unexpected situation, I'd rather take a gamble. AI Ching turned her phone in her hand. Once she made the decision, her expression calmed down again, without any anxiety. Even if the higher-ups doubted her ability, she would accept it. The uneasy premonition that was so strong that it could drive people crazy quickly disappeared, as if it was an illusion. Only the cold sweat that was gradually drying under her clothes could show how much she had struggled to make this ridiculous decision. She looked at the phone screen and sneered mockingly. She laughed at herself. She was only 2 months away from becoming an official, but now it was hard to say. If it turned out to be a false report, being stripped of her position as inspector would be a light punishment. After all, the Special Situation Countermeasures Room was increasingly short on manpower. But for some reason, he had a bad feeling in his heart. All the escape routes had been arranged. As long as he finished this job, he would immediately leave, but he still couldn't hide the panic in his heart. Something was not right. He subconsciously gnawed on his fingers, once again gnawing on the healed flesh. The uneasiness in his heart grew stronger and stronger. Start the sermon immediately. He finally couldn't wait any longer. He suddenly stomped his feet, picked up the box on the table, and told his disciple, "Don't perform those boring programs. Anyway, this time draw cleanly, no need to warm up." After his disciple left in a hurry, he tried to suppress the panic in his heart and put on the kind smile that had long become muscle memory. But suddenly, he felt a vibration in his pocket. It was his phone. It was a strange text message from an unknown number, but the content of the message made his face turn pale. Tu Tai was arrested. The people from the astronomy club are here. Run. Wang Hai, you have 1 minute. Instantly, the bone-piercing chill almost made him scream. Even though he didn't know who the person who sent the message was and how they knew this number that only a few of his confidants knew, he didn't have time to care about that anymore. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. Run. He had to leave now. He couldn't stay in Xin Hai any longer. In the intense fear that almost made him scream, he hugged the box, pushed out the door from the lounge, and rushed forward like crazy. He kicked the door open, grabbed the key, and rushed in the direction of the back door. Just as he turned the corner, he heard a voice in front of him. "Little brother, why are you leaving already? Didn't we have a good talk?" The old Annie, who was the first to be hit on by Yu Dongri, grabbed Yu Dongri's arm passionately and urged him to stay. "After the sermon is over, Big Sister will make you some noodles." "No, Big Sister, I have something urgent to do. I really have something urgent to do." Yu Dongri struggled hard and raised his head. He saw Wang Hai. Wang Hai also saw him. As if looking at each other across an abyss, the two people's expressions froze. The next moment, determination and viciousness flashed across their faces. Then there was the sound of gunfire. It came from behind Yu Dongri. In the young man's hand, the muzzle of the gun was smoking. It was Huaishur. At that moment, he grabbed the gun from behind Yu Dongri, aimed, and fired. But he was not aiming at Wang Hai, but at the big sister next to Yu Dongri. She wants to kill someone. In the strong stimulation brought by the premonition of death, Huaishur could feel the murderous intent from this seemingly friendly old auntie. The murderous intent was enough to tear himself and Yu Dongri into pieces. In the hasty firing, Huaishur almost lost his grip. The bullet that was aimed at the old auntie's body was deflected to the grandma's side. It only hit her hand that was holding Yu Dongri. It opened a large hole in her wrist and almost killed Yu Dongri. Silence came. Blood splattered. Yu Dongri subconsciously dodged and retreated. He saw the old hand that was originally holding him gradually turn into the color of steel, and sharp iron-gray fingernails extended from the fingertips. As the flesh slowly healed, a deformed bullet was squeezed out of the wound. Was it seen through? The old lady slowly raised her head. Her old face gradually distorted, and her pupils turned into the familiar blood-red color. Her face gradually turned into the appearance of a beast, and she smiled at them hungrily. "Damn it, Yu Dongri screamed. Closed 3. 5. There were 3 minutes and 30 seconds left before the closure of Laotang. The situation began to slide in the worst direction. Not only the Dongxia football team, but also Huaishur, and the others did not have much time left. It was naturally impossible for everyone to sit down and drink tea and chat in such an awkward situation under such an abrupt and awkward situation. Yu Dongri was the fastest to react. In other words, this coquettish guy was prepared to show off his so-called beautiful face to others 24/7. "What are you looking at?" After a loud shout, who subconsciously looked over, stiffened in place. Yu Dongri grabbed the pistol that almost numbed Huaishur's claws and aimed at his old sister and fired wildly. Of course, the lovey-dovey village love scene just now disappeared in the gunfire. In the blink of an eye, an entire magazine was emptied. But without the shooting of a large-caliber lethal weapon, the lethality of a pistol was very little against a sublimator who had entered the 3rd stage and whose internal organs had begun to transform into ether. The old lady had already closed her eyes. The situation of offense and defense had reversed. Huaishur did not just stand there. He summoned his courage, rolled up his sleeves, and rushed straight to Wang Hai. He suddenly flew up and kicked. "Leave the box." Wang Hai, who was about to turn around and run away, was kicked in the waist by him. His entire body flew out and landed on the ground. However, he still held the box tightly in his arms and didn't let go. Then, Huaishur pounced on him and performed a set of military boxing on his old face. Because he was not sure if Wang Hai had any strange abilities, he did not hold back at all. He hit his own fingers until they hurt. Poor Wang Hai was valued by the lords only because of his talent in preaching. Even when he went out to cheat, he relied on his own mouth. When had he ever fought with someone so ugly? He was just an ordinary person. Now, the Savior Society's #1 big shot, the old lady, was entangled with Yu Dongri. The disciples who were supposed to be his bodyguards did not have time to arrive. Today, Huaishur's military boxing was unforeseen. Huaishur performed half a set of military boxing moves and felt extremely comfortable all over. Every pore on her body felt refreshed. When she saw that the old man was beaten to the point where he couldn't even fight back, she immediately relaxed a lot. Then she gnashed her teeth even more angrily. "You're the one who found someone to mess with me, aren't you? I told you to silence me. I told you to commit crimes. I told you to sell drugs. I told you to let society down. Where did this little bastard come from? Go to hell." Wang Hai was completely enraged. He waved his arms wildly. Huaisher felt a pain in his arm. Then, a bloody mark burst out from under his torn clothes. He was cut by a knife. While Huaisher was not paying attention, Wang Hai pulled out the dagger from his shoe. Then, Wang Hai seized the opportunity and held the box in his arms. He suddenly opened the lid and waved it at Huaisher. Suddenly, a mist-like powder flew out and landed on Huaisher's face. The effect of that damn thing was amazing. As soon as he inhaled it, Huaisher's body went soft. A mess of illusions appeared in his mind. He felt so good that it was as if he was on cloud 9. Then he knew that he had fallen into the old woman's trap. Mother Faster's cur, you suck too. He grabbed Wang Hai's collar, and with a grab of his hand, he refined a handful of ash and stuffed it on Wang Hai's face without thinking, rubbing it fiercely. Wang Hai's old face suddenly turned red. Snot and tears flowed down his face. He wailed like a ghost and howled like a wolf. Huaisher took advantage of the free time to stuff some into his mouth. Suddenly, the ecstasy in his heart was diluted by the sudden sadness. His originally floating and inflated consciousness quickly withered under the terrible effect of the soul swill. The two people were alternating between joy and sadness. They laughed wildly with tears and snot on their faces. They were entangled together like an internal conflict in a mental hospital. It could be said that they met their match, but the time they spent pecking each other was so short. From the beginning until now, it had only been 25 seconds. Then, the dizzy illusion was awakened by a loud noise. It came from behind them. In just 20 seconds, Yu Dongri's face had been dyed red with blood. The custom-made suit on his body had completely turned into a beggar's suit. A deep wound in front of his chest almost cut his abdomen open. The pistol was already in the hand of Qi, but it was casually thrown aside. For him, it was a hellish 25 seconds. Even if Qi closed her eyes, she could easily beat him. And at the moment when he fell back, he finally found an opportunity. From the hidden holster under his suit, he pulled out the long-prepared trump card and aimed at the old woman in the air. It was a short-barreled shotgun that was cut down again. This was a good thing that he specially prepared for Qi. The opportunity was fleeting. Why did I shoot at old Lu? Also, what am I doing? His thoughts became a mess in an instant. Then, he felt a strong wave of nausea. His stomach churned, and he suddenly bent down and vomited. Then, he felt that he had vomited something out. It fell into the filth on the ground. It was a goldfish that seemed to be alive and kicking. Goldfish. Goldfish again. The person who passed by just now also had goldfish in his eyes. And at the very beginning, before the corpse died, it also vomited goldfish. So, it's the stress period. It's been less than 6 hours, and there's a rejection reaction. Behind him, a strange hoarse voice sighed. Even the second-generation goldfish can resist. No wonder the first 3 generations of goldfish can't parasitize. What bad luck. Otherwise, the box would have been in our hands long ago. Why would we go through so much trouble? Following the hoarse sigh, the air slowly distorted. A thin figure walked out of the empty air, revealing a dark trench coat and a cold and indifferent face, a pair of blood-red gloves, and a fish tank in his right hand. There were a few slender goldfish swimming slowly in the small fish tank. Green sun? In the pool of blood, Yu Dongri saw the green ring emblem on the back of his hand and finally reacted. He tried to raise the muzzle. Huaisher, run. The red glove looked down at him and shook his head in pity. You can't even take care of yourself. How can you care about other things? The chill of death suddenly appeared. Then, gunshots sounded from behind Huaisher. There was a bang. And then another bang. One shot was for Yu Dongri, and one shot was for Huaishir himself. Yu Dongri twitched, and then there was no more sound. Huaishir looked down stiffly and saw the blood gradually coming out of his chest. There was also a hole, as if someone had hit his back with a sledgehammer. It hurt like hell. He fell to his knees and wept uncontrollably. But when he looked back and saw the person who shot him, the hoarse cry of pain froze in his throat. Laoyang, the stooped man with a hollow expression, raised his head and looked at him. There seemed to be traces of a smile on his face, which had a Philistine smile, all year round. Behind the pair of eyes, a goldfish swam around happily. It was as if he was in his own fish tank. Under Huaishir's stunned gaze, he bent down, picked up the box, stepped on the blood, and stood behind the man, waiting for orders. Go and lock the front door, and then prepare for the ceremony. After waiting for so long, there has to be some value. The stranger ordered, and Laoyang turned and left. He didn't even look back at Huaishir. Are you acquaintances? The stranger looked down at Huaishir and smiled jokingly. He owed a lot of money for others and can only use himself to pay off the debt. Don't blame him, and don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame your bad luck. Chapter 22. The test tube in the red glove's hand seemed to contain a broken limb. The skin seemed to be made of some kind of metal, and the bones seemed to be made of crystal. It was a finger. Without a doubt, it had been taken from a sage's corpse. It was more than enough to be used as a seed for the sage insignia or as a basis for descending. With so much origin substance, it should be enough for initial development, right? The red glove laughed, then suddenly smashed the test tube in the box. In the blink of an eye, countless shards of glass flew out, then dissipated into the air. They weren't physical in the first place. The entire test tube was a container made of myriad dissolving agent, and its purpose was to tightly isolate the inside from the outside. The instant it came into contact with the air, the finger trembled slightly, as if it had sensed the freedom of the air. In the blink of an eye, the origin substance that had been stored in the box over the past few days had been completely sucked dry. Immediately afterwards, a shriek erupted from the auditorium. Very quickly, the shriek disappeared. It turned into a field of silence. Only droplets of crystalline origin substance began to appear, slowly seeping into the finger bone. Immediately afterwards, an aura of madness and malice began to rise from the finger bone. It was like a tidal wave, sweeping out in all directions. It was a storm of thirst and malice. It wildly blew off into the distance, greedily enveloping everything, violently absorbing all thoughts, and automatically pulling at all the origin substance it could sense. Its range was the entire Old Tang village. Even an ascendant would find it hard to withstand the gravitational pull from the center of the storm. The red glove retreated a few steps, then heard a crackling sound. It was the sound of his own hair shattering. A few strands of his hair had dried up like weeds, blown off by the wind and falling to the ground. He raised his hand and touched his face, feeling the traces of wrinkles. The corners of his eyes seemed to have aged several decades in an instant, and the dense wrinkles and age spots that only old people would have appeared. Immediately afterwards, flesh and blood began to sprout from the cracks in his finger, and his bones began to grow. In the blink of an eye, the remaining sage insignia had been awakened, spontaneously extracting the origin substance it had plundered, rapidly developing into a complete form. The seed was growing. No, it should be called recovery. The first was the first stage, mercury, the legendary first metal. It was made from salt, sulfur, and mercury. It was the foundation of all living things. With this as the basis, the remnant will in the holy corpse awaken from its silence and cast an indifferent glance at the now unfamiliar world. Next was the second stage, gold. Its characteristics had been discovered, and its attributes had been perfected. Then, the little finger moved slightly, and the iron current collapsed inwards, gathering the remaining grenades into a point. The next moment, blazing flames erupted in the sky. The sudden appearance of the flames illuminated the undamaged hand. Then, the second round of bombardment fell from the sky. Very good. Continue, maintain suppressive fire. In the command center, the middle-aged man was excited. He wasn't discouraged at all. The counterattack of the wind disaster's hand proved that it still didn't have the ability to withstand direct bombardment. Otherwise, there would be no need to waste time on such things. As the shelter of ordinary people and the cornerstone of the world, the reality had the strictest rules and regulations. Unless one reached the level of a natural enemy and turned into a walking human-shaped hell, it was impossible to contend with the laws of physics head-on. As long as there was enough firepower, it wasn't as if there were no records of Crown falling under the siege of an army. It's a pity. If only there were missiles. AI Ching sighed, regretfully. Then, she heard the person in the command center shout in surprise, "The reinforcements from the higher-ups have set off." She was stunned for a moment. First, she sighed in relief. Then, she vaguely felt that something was wrong. The guardian of the reality that was currently on duty in East Xia didn't seem to be very reliable. Thinking of the rumors that were circulating among her colleagues, her heart suddenly sank again. Under the frenzied fire of the 16 howitzers, even though it was constantly counterattacking, the palm that contended against the power of the blockade was still sinking inch by inch. It was being suppressed. Even more than half of the church had collapsed. Unfortunately, there were no traces of survivors. This was to be expected. The mutant known as the Beast of Wind Disaster was best at creating a vortex of source substances to extract other people's source substances as fuel. Now, the church, no, the entire Laotang town, was probably already in the short period of waiting. The atmosphere in the command center gradually became more and more solemn. In the past, it would take less than 3 minutes to directly airdrop reinforcements to the reality through the Arcana realm. However, the waiting time at this moment was so long. Only the reality guardian who came to reinforce kept sending text messages to comfort the people in the command center. "They've set off. They're coming. They're on the way. They'll be there in a minute." Text messages were sent every few minutes. At first, everyone still had hope, but in the end, they didn't want to say anything. Until finally, bad news came from the artillery position. The ammunition was exhausted. "There's a bit of a traffic jam. I'll be there soon." Chapter 23. At that moment, a gust of wind howled. The hand that hung high in the sky slowly rose and aimed at the brightly lit Exine High City in the distance. The 5 fingers slowly clenched. It was as if the hand had grabbed onto something invisible. It pulled with all its might. A sharp screech erupted from the void. It was like the sound of countless pieces of glass being scratched together. The deafening sound spread out. The world shook. It was as if someone was trying to pull out the wedge that held the sky and the earth together. At that moment, a white shadow landed under one of the street lights at the countryside of Exine High. "Finally, I made it." The white dove slowly retracted its wings and landed on the girl's slender arm. As if she had just finished a marathon, she was already drenched in sweat. Her tight-fitting sports t-shirt and running pants were soaked, sticking to her beautiful body. Unfortunately, no one was lucky enough to see her. She gasped for air and looked at the hand that was floating in the air dozens of kilometers away. She shook her head helplessly. Under the illumination of the street light, her shadow seemed to come alive. It slowly raised its hands, as if pulling out some invisible weapon. 2. It slashed forward, and then silence descended. At that moment, the rumbling in the distance, the chirping of flying insects, the falling dust, the flowing wind, the rushing river, the rising fire, and the solid ground all stopped. It was as if they had been frozen by an invisible force. In the next moment, a trace that was so thin that it was almost impossible to see extended out from under her feet. It stretched forward in a straight line, spanning 23 kilometers and 411 meters. It was precise to the millimeter of destruction. Without any hesitation, the palm was separated from the middle and fell to the sides. Then it was broken at the waist and turned into 4 pieces. Before the 4 pieces could fall apart, they split into 8 pieces. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. The cruel and precise geometric increase extended to the limit of human observation. In the end, the shattered origin substance exploded. It turned into a fire that burned everything. Everything ended here. Before this sword that could not even be described with any movement, it had come to an end. It was over. Hopefully, there won't be too many victims. She sighed dejectedly. Then, she heard the sound of the phone in her pocket. Hello? I'll be right there. I got lost just now. I really got lost. There's definitely something wrong with your airdrop. I'll be right there. 5 minutes. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Yeah, I'm on my way. The pigeon and the girl both disappeared. Great strength of heaven and earth, freedom, divine ability. The moment the wind disaster beast's palm shattered, the red glove's face turned ashen. He squeezed out a voice through gritted teeth. White Emperor's son. Pa! A shattering sound suddenly appeared on his face. Cracks spread out, and in an instant, it was as if there were countless swords slashing at him. Half of his body had turned into a bloody mess, and the invisible swords were still tearing at his body until the pendant on his neck let out a wail. The doll with a blank face shattered into dust. The blank doll took his place and bore the remaining power of the White Emperor's son's sword. However, even the last bit of radiation that leaked out was enough to make him suffer. Even the soul manifestation in his hand, the sneering fish tank, had a terrible crack on it. One of the 2 baby fishes inside had already flipped on its belly. The other one was also swaying half dead. It seemed that it did not have much time left to live. Damn it, those monsters! The red glove suddenly bent over and vomited a mouthful of blood. He heard the heavy footsteps in the distance. The army had already begun to move. A ruthless look flashed in his eyes. He took out the detonator from his pocket and pressed it down. The plastic explosives placed around the church lit up with a final countdown. This way, the last traces would be completely wiped out in 15 seconds. It did not matter if he failed. As long as the reincarnation cauldron was still there, he turned around and extended his hand towards the pulpit, but his hand and his sinister smile froze in place. The pulpit was empty, gone. The reincarnation cauldron was gone. That box had already disappeared without a trace. He furiously opened the pulpit, but found nothing. He roared hoarsely. Amidst the approaching footsteps, he frantically tore the pulpit apart. Still, he could not find anything. When the remaining door of the church was suddenly smashed open and the suppression troops broke in, they saw a man with red eyes like a mad dog standing on the pulpit. He spat and disdainfully gestured his middle finger at the group of soldiers. Eat *T, you bunch of zombies from the Astronomy Society. He threw out a poker card. The poker card suddenly folded in half in the air, pulling his body together. Then he folded again and again along with the poker card. In a flash, he became an insignificant and was sucked into a deep cave and disappeared. The next moment, the flames of destruction engulfed everything. The feeling of excessive blood loss turned out not to be painful. He could not even feel pain. He was just sleepy and had no strength in his body. He was lazy, as if nothing was important. He wanted to sleep, to rest, to let this F***** life end. He closed his eyes and accepted the full taste of this long torture with a clear conscience, a long, undisturbed sleep. Death was coming. After seeing so many deaths and so many different kinds of deaths, Weischer found that he finally ushered in his own end. It was not terrifying nor painful. There was even no reluctance. He was just sleepy and confused. In a trance, he felt that someone was pushing his body, struggling to hold a stick and push forward, little by little, like a snail pushing a stone. He was flipped over and sprawled on a tattered carpet. Then he was dragged to a certain place by someone. He smelled the smell of burning, heard the sound of breaking, and hoarse moans as if the whole world was being destroyed. There was a drop of water on Weischer's face. There was the smell of blood. He opened his eyes with difficulty and saw Yu Dongri next to him. He did not know whether he was alive or dead, and in front of him, the old man who was crawling on the carpet. The one-legged figure pushed forward with all his might, pushed open a door, and turned his head. His face seemed to have been broken. Half of his face did not change at all, as pale as a corpse. The other half spasmed violently, together with the other half of his body. It was as if half of him had died, and the other half was struggling hard, but there was no cure. Seeing Weischer's dazed eyes, he avoided his eyes. He just rolled up the carpet with difficulty, wrapped himself and Yu Dongri together, and rolled forward with difficulty. "I'm sorry. I have to save her. Weischer, only I can save her. I'm sorry," he whispered hoarsely, as if apologizing, but he did not expect a response. He just muttered to himself, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." A phone rang. The great llama on the fake phone was singing some love song happily and calling for her husband, but no one picked up the call. "I'm sorry." Blood fell on Weischer's face with the warmth of tears. He was shoved into the darkness behind the door and tumbled down the long steps into the cellar full of litter and pickle jars. In the violent tumble and fall, Weischer saw Lao Yang's face for the last time. He leaned on the doorframe and looked at the young man. The corner of his twitching mouth pulled up into a wretched angle, as if he was smiling. He held the phone that was still vibrating in his hand and waved at him. It was as if he was saying goodbye. Weischer opened his mouth and wanted to call him, but he could not make a sound. The door was closed. In the darkness, the roar of an explosion came from afar. Terrifying flames and high temperature swept through the entire church, turning the last remnants into ashes. Weischer closed his eyes. Death hugged him. Someone asked me to bring a message to everyone. The stiff and rigid man was trapped in the chair and kept twitching nervously. The goldfish in his eyes swam lifelessly. He said. His expression suddenly turned crazed, and a wicked smile appeared on his face. "The green sun will eventually shine on the world." Bang! 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 In the sudden gunshot, his head exploded, but the gunshots did not stop. After emptying a magazine, he replaced it with a new one, and he continued to pull the trigger until the thing on the chair turned into a pile of mush. Although it's not strong enough, it should be able to be used as a temporary spare part. I wonder if dismembering it while it's still alive can preserve the best effect. He sighed and cut open the arteries on Weischer's hands and thighs without hesitation. Weischer's throat made a gurgling sound, but it was to no avail. Warm blood quickly spread from his body, flowing along the grooves of the operating table and into the filthy cylinder. "You have something to say?" The old man looked at his trembling pupils and said somewhat helplessly, "You're about to die. Isn't it better to die quietly? I've seen many people like you. You've already crossed the border and fallen into hell. Isn't it natural for you to die? Right now, it's just that the origin substance hasn't dissipated yet. What's there to complain about?" He pulled out a bottle of medicine and poured it into Weischer's bloody mouth. An intense, spicy, and strange sour taste stimulated Weischer's throat. A scorching sensation, like copper liquid, flowed down his throat, igniting his body like a raging fire. He could only let out a hoarse groan of pain. "This is the medicine I bought from the kobold. It's used to mummify people. It can keep their organs active when they're about to die. But don't even think about living. It's just converting your remaining life into vitality and squeezing it out. This way, you can say a few more words before you die, and it'll be more convenient for me to work. How about you cooperate a little?" The old man lowered his head and cut open Weischer's broken right hand. "Remember, don't scream. I hate noisy sounds." Weischer struggled to suppress the sound of pain. His whole body twitched. As the old man said, he could actually make a weak sound before he died. "Where is this?" "In your words, the 12th level of hell. My corpse workshop, a place where I sell some small things to customers. You'll become one of those small things in a while." As the old man spoke, he continued to dissect Weischer's right hand without hesitation. The knife was very precise. It penetrated through the muscles, but did not hurt Weischer's bones. It was as if he was simply peeling the skin off a fruit. His movements were practiced and natural. "How about we make a deal?" Weischer swallowed the taste of pain and panted with difficulty. "I actually want to continue living. Let me go." "No, I've already bought your corpse. How can you not die? Also, you won't live for more than a few minutes. If you die outside, I'll have to drag you back in." Under the dim light, the old man's two eyeballs moved around on different axes. One black eye stared at Weischer, while the other red eye stared intently at the place where the knife was cutting. "Look at your body. It's empty of origin substance. You don't have much time left. Even though your life force is so strong, it's about to burn out like ashes. Wouldn't it be better if you just obediently died?" Chapter 25. Not good. The old man sighed. "You're so upset that you can't even die in peace. I don't want to die either. Can't you just let me go?" Weischer's breathing became turbid because the old man had already cut open his chest and taken out his broken lungs. "See, they're all broken, all broken." The old man wiped his sweat with his wrist and threw the things into the trash can. "Your lungs are gone. Why are you so annoying? You can live for half an hour if you don't have a heart. Half an hour is fine. Stop nagging." The old man cut off the blood vessels entangled in the spine and pulled out his internal organs. Weischer never thought that it would feel like this when someone pulled out his intestines from his stomach. Ignoring the pain and fear, it actually felt cool. "I've emptied you out. Accept your fate." The old man threw everything into the bucket. Blood and undigested food splashed on him, making him take out a rag to wipe his apron angrily. "What did you eat? It's so messy. A traitor friend treated me to hot pot at noon." Weischer had already lost his breath. What was incredible was that he could still make a sound. Perhaps the fear of death had broken through his disguise. He had never felt so lonely and sad. He didn't want to die, but he wanted to find someone to talk to, so he kept talking. "Have you eaten hot pot? You look like a foreigner." Hot pot is a specialty of China. Let me tell you, although Lao Yang's people are troublesome, his hot pot is really the best. The old man stopped talking and buried his head in dissecting Weischer's body. He carefully dug out his bones from top to bottom. Even if Weischer promised a lot of money beautiful women and other temptations, he didn't relent. Even if Huaisher cursed him, he didn't stop. In the end, only a bloody skeleton was left lying on the dissection table. He came naked and left naked. He took off his stinky clothes, but this guy was still F*** king alive. And for some reason, he kept talking trash. Even if the old man angrily used a chisel to cut open his skull, took out the steaming tissue and threw it into the trash can in front of the skeleton, he still kept persuading the old man to put down the butcher's knife. You've already been cut to this extent. Why don't you hurry up and die? Who the F*** knows? You son of a B***tch, psycho, old pervert, a hoarse, monotonous voice came from the skeleton. I say, can you save me? I'll sell myself to you. As long as you're not gay, I'll do anything you say. Wait, I'm okay with being gay. Really? I can accept it if you're gentle. The old man's white hair stood up in anger, revealing the stitches on his face. He slammed the table in a frenzy. Death is destined. Even if it's meant to be, I don't want to. Huaisher hesitated for a moment and tried to negotiate with him. Can't I die after I've lived enough? The old man fell silent. He scratched his head madly and let out an irritated roar. Chapter 26. Huaisher opened his eyes and saw the light of the afternoon outside the window. Dust was detached from the ceiling and danced chaotically in the dim light. The air was filled with a familiar musty smell, and he heard the sound of dripping water next door. This was his home. After a dream, he was lying on a broken sofa in the hall. I'm still alive? How long did I sleep? He got up in a daze and touched his chest. He saw that the wound was bandaged properly. There was a faint, throbbing pain, but it didn't hinder his movement. In particular, he discovered that the Book of Destiny had transformed from its physical form into his will. He could flip through it on his own, with just a thought. Soon, he heard a voice beside him. About 10 hours or so. It seems that you're recovering well. The girl sitting in front of the window looked up at him. Her calm face made Huaisher uneasy. What happened last night? By the way, old Lou, you dongri? He's alive. The operation should be over now. He's in the intensive care unit. If he recovers well, he might have a chance to wake up in the future. But this isn't your fault. It's better to say that you're lucky to be alive after being targeted by Green Sunday, AI Ching said calmly. Although a lot of things happened last night and the mastermind escaped, for you it's all over. Over? Yes, it's over. AI Ching nodded. No matter what happens next has nothing to do with you. No one will target you in the future. She stared at Huaisher and told him solemnly, Congratulations. Congratulations, you can return to your peaceful life. If AI Ching had told him this yesterday, he would have been overjoyed. But now, hearing this news, he couldn't feel happy at all. He didn't even have a happy reaction. AI Ching didn't say anything else. She closed the book and prepared to leave. After rejecting Huaisher's offer, she got up with the help of her crutches and said goodbye. What's wrong? She saw Huaisher's absent-minded look and tilted her head. Is there anything else you want to ask? If you're worried about Yu Dongri's car, someone will drive it away in 2 days. Don't worry, I'll call you before I come. Huaisher shook his head and looked at her. I've actually been wondering where I've seen you these days. AI Ching was silent for a long time before she calmly shook her head. It doesn't matter if you can't remember. It's not important anyway. Just forget about it. She walked out of the door, took one last look at Huaisher, and nodded to say goodbye. Then, I'm going to Jinling to report on my work. I wish you all the best in the future. I hope we won't meet again. She said, Farewell, Huaisher. The door closed. In the silence, Huaisher was silent as he watched AI Ching get into the car with the help of the chauffeur. The door was closed, and she walked away slowly, finally disappearing at the end of the road. For the whole afternoon, Huaisher sat on the steps of the garden, his usual place, looking at the bare nursery in a daze. Feeling lost, right? Crow appeared out of nowhere, stood on his shoulder, and patted his head. Don't be sad. Come on, have a smoke to relax. If you really can't, buy a bottle of wine, drink a few sips, and sleep. Everything will be over. Everything will be over. Huaisher looked at her. Yes, everything will be over. Crow said casually. Isn't everything over? Huaisher, as you wish, you've gotten rid of those messy things and welcomed back the peaceful life you've always wanted. Huaisher did not answer. Was it over? Maybe, but the relief he expected did not come. There was no relief. There was even a trace of anger that came from nowhere. Obviously, nothing was over. He suddenly remembered Lao Yang's face. At the last moment, when that bastard looked at him, he was actually smiling. Once he was about to die, it was as if he could be free. Obviously, nothing could be free. He just sold his life in exchange for another person's life. Would the woman he saved be happy? What on earth was he so proud of? And Yu Dongri, who was now in the intensive care unit. Huaisher used to think that they were his friends, but now one of them was shot from behind by him, and the other one was shot from behind by him. He lost two friends, and the initiator of all this had already slipped away. How could it end so suddenly? He raised his hand to cover his face. He could no longer hold back the anger and exhaustion in his heart. Damn it! Crow looked at him with pity. For the first time in a long time, she saw Huaisher so angry. Other than that, it seemed that no matter what he encountered, he would only shamelessly lie on the ground and let the chaotic wheel of fate run over him like an old salted fish. He was born with a good temper. Let him be strong. Anyway, I feel good. However, she had a nagging feeling that Huaisher was missing something. She was hiding something, or perhaps trying to hide something. It was only now that she vaguely understood that perhaps this empty garden was the place where he was most relaxed. Only here would he be able to face her calmly. Even though he was so resistant to this place in his heart, I say, Huaisher, she asked seriously, is this place important to you? Probably. Huaisher looked down at the small garden under the steps and was silent for a long time. If you don't want to say it, just pretend I didn't ask. Crow shook her head. After all, prying into your privacy is not something to be proud of. No. Anyway, there is no need to hide it. I'm just thinking about how to tell you. Huaisher rubbed his face and pondered for a long time, thinking seriously. He said, when I was young, I had a high fever. At that time, my parents were very angry because they were playing abroad, and I didn't take good care of myself. He said, I'm going to kill him, under the light of the setting sun. The crow stared at the outline in Huaisher's hand in astonishment. It was an invisible piece of metal forged purely from origin substance. Burning rage and icy killing intent mixed together, reflecting a cruel light. It was the killing intent and death that had been sleeping here for 7 years that had been given substance. It was an iron weapon created from nightmares and fear. It was as if he was holding a flame. In that instant, Huaisher's right hand was ignited by that invisible force, and white flames rose up. The true appearance was revealed from the silence. So that's how it is. So that's how it is, she murmured softly, suddenly realizing what was happening to Huaisher's body. He had broken through the barrier between spirit and matter and realized the transformation between iron and origin substance. After 7 years, Huaisher finally crossed the long period of stress. As the origin substance burned, his nature sublimated, and he welcomed his own soul. That was the one and only true soul name that the Silver Ocean bestowed upon him at the end. Sealing Hand. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.